Hello everybody, welcome back to the Adam Clery football channel with me, obviously Adam Clery, and are Arsenal signing Benjamin Sesko? Well, I can exclusively reveal for you all right now that nobody has any idea. They definitely need a centre-forward, they definitely want a centre-forward, but at this stage, your guess is as good as mine. But I'll tell you this though, as sure as eggs is eggs, which I think is an expression, they're definitely trying to get him, so shall we have a little look at why? Yes, we shall. Alright then, so Benjamin Sesko is a dashing centre-forward, both in the sense that he is very quick, but also very handsome. He is 6'5", has started to fill out physically in the last year or so, and is still only 22 years old. Told you, every single video. In terms of his play style, he's an absolute all-rounder of a centre-forward. He's extremely comfortable, taking it with his back to goal, bullying his marker, but also loves to hang on the shoulder of the last defender and burst in behind. You sort of want to think of him, like, theoretically, as a bit of a cross between what Haaland used to do at Dortmund and what Alexander Isak at Newcastle does now. That was not me saying, oh, he's a cross between Haaland and Isak. The main thing we are going to touch upon in this video is that if you do buy Benjamin Sesko, what you're really buying, what you're paying incredibly well for, is Benjamin Sesko's potential. Based on his 5 seasons in the Red Bull system, first at Salzburg and now at Leipzig, it looks like he could go right to the very top of European football. He could be one of the most ruthless, prolific, dominating centre-forwards in all of world football, but crucially, unlike Isak and unlike Haaland, he is not that right now. He's nowhere near that. But in order to understand why that fact to one side, he still feels like a very appealing proposition to Arsenal and potentially even worth the money, you really do have to look at what Arsenal's best 11 is right now. Now, if you're an Arsenal fan, you no doubt will recall there was a little bit of sniffiness and skepticism when Kai Havertz started getting used in this sort of false 9 top of the pitch role, but he adapted very well to it. He scored some really important goals. You would say, everybody being fit, he's your starting centre-forward. And indeed, last season, before the injury, he played all but 2 of his games directly through the middle, and as a seasonal heat map, which, you know, I love a seasonal heat map, that's how this ends up looking. And there is, you can see, there's absolutely box presence. He will get himself in there. He loves getting on the end of a cross, but by and large, he is spending the majority of time where he is most comfortable, and that is in this sort of right-sided, outside-the-box channel. Now, do not get me wrong. I do not see this as a negative. Kai Havertz is extremely good at doing what it is that Kai Havertz does, but this is not the heat map of a player who is going to consistently and reliably disrupt opposition defences. And just to show you what that does look like over the course of a season, as a point of comparison, here is Alexander Isak's heat map last season. And you'll be able to see pretty much straight away, not unlike Kai Havertz, he's another forward who is really good at dropping out of that central area, pulling defenders all over the place, getting on the ball in deeper areas. But you will also note that even for a striker who likes to drop off almost as much as Kai Havertz does, Isak's box presence is noticeably, what's the word I want here? Noticeably more, that'll do. Noticeably more noticeable. That's what you'll notice. But then on top of that, even the times he is going looking for it, it is almost entirely central. Like, even though this is away from the goal, just the same as Kai Havertz is away from the goal, if you're a defender, you much rather would see the centre-forward going into these areas than you would the centre-forward going into these areas. Like, just to go back to Kai Havertz's heat map, like, it's still not ideal, this, don't get me wrong, but you'd be a lot more comfortable with it if you were a centre-back. Like, more things need to happen for a chance to come from here than they do for a chance to come from here. So that's Isak, obviously, but now, and pants immediately off, lads, this is Erling Braut Haaland. And obviously this is a player who can go looking for it if he really wants to, but Haaland, as I'm sure you well know, plays almost exclusively in you mode. If you're daft enough to have a high line against Man City, he will steamroller past you into the space, and if you're really, really deep, he will just still try to steamroller through you to get on the end of the service he has provided. Don't get me wrong, he's not the battering ram he was at Borussia Dortmund, where every single game felt like some sort of social experiment on what would happen if you let the biggest boy in year 11 play with just everybody in year 4. City are a very different team, it doesn't work like that. But he's not that player either. He still wants to absolutely monster defenders, and believe it or not, right, Kai Havertz is the same height as Haaland. They're both 6'4", but he doesn't do that. He's never going to do that. So, as raw as he is, and we're moving on to Sesko's heat map now, in case that wasn't immediately obvious, that is what he offers you. He's still got this frothing at the mouth desire to get into the box, to get at defenders directly, but also he'll drop off, but pretty much exclusively to give himself like a running start on whoever it is doing the marking of him. He profiles as a complete centre forward, and that isn't just something Arsenal don't have, it's the main thing Arsenal don't have. It's the thing they're furthest away from having. So when you go through all the heat maps and all the data and all the numbers, and you actually sit and watch him as well, that is clearly the kind of player Benjamin Sesko is. Like, I am at pains not to get carried away here, but in terms of a profile, he's like a cross between Alexander Isak and Proto Haaland. Technically, positionally, physically, like, he's not there yet, but it looks like one day he might have the lot. So if, and don't get me wrong, right now that is an if so big you could see it from space, right? But if he reaches that potential, then he will have the technical mastery of Alexander Isak, but be way more physical and direct, and have that battering ram quality of Erling Haaland, but be way more comfortable dropping into certain spaces to link up the play. The problem is that right now, he is nowhere near said potential. Across Europe's top 5 leagues, he had a perfectly acceptable season for a 22-year-old playing for the Bundesliga's 7th best team. 45 appearances in all competitions, including the Champions League, 21 goals, 6 assists. He had a really rough start, only scoring in like 1 game out of the first 8, but then scores in 5 games in a row before ending the season with 8 goal contributions, which I absolutely hate as a term. I think that's bad process, but whatever. You get what I mean. You can see them there in 16 games. And don't get me wrong, those are pretty decent numbers, but when you start to look at his personal underlying numbers, they're a little bit of a ways away from what you'd ideally want to see if you're going to have to spend big money and you need goals right now. So purely in terms of shooting, this is kind of the stats you want to look at, because shot volume's more of an indicator of how well the team are playing. Like, you can be the best centre forward in the world. If you're surrounded by a load of bombs, then your chances aren't going to be very good. So you sort of want to look at the conversion. He gets a good amount of his shots on target. That is a top 20% of strikers in Europe sort of score, but then it falls away a bit. And he's right around the European average for how many shots he needs to score a goal and how many shots on target he needs to score a goal. However, for the real nerds amongst us, like me, slightly more encouraging numbers. If you go down the bottom here, the goals minus XG, which if you're into this kind of thing, basically the XG is how many goals he should have and the minus the amount of goals he does get. So if you end up with a positive number, you're an overperformer, you're an overachiever, and he has got that. Not massively, don't get me wrong, he's not a miracle worker, but he is, according to the numbers, getting more goals than he probably should, and that's usually the hallmark of a good finisher. But to be fair, the reason he does that is pretty obvious. He's got an absolute cannon in his locker and will occasionally just kind of pad that stat out to hell by lashing one right in the top corner. And it's obviously much harder to find highlights of him doing things badly, but trust me on this, he is capable of murdering any small children who happen to sit in the first 20 rows. So if you're an Emirates season ticket holder behind the goals, maybe just be aware of that. But when he does connect, which sometimes he does, he really does connect. Anyway, some other numbers that are relevant to assessing him. You can see that the technical element of his game, his in-possession stats, his touches in the middle, how frequently he both attempts to and successfully takes on an opponent. These elements of his game have come on quite considerably in the last year. Like, if we compare these to the same numbers from last season, you will see that all the important bits are up quite considerably. So undeniably, he is developing. He's also just a beast in the air, like the very top percentage for the aerial win percentage in all of Europe. And obviously that would be a massive benefit to Arsenal, because I don't know if you heard about this last season, but they're actually quite good at clever set-piece routines and like to score those goals. Like, I think Havertz is pretty good in the air. Like, he gets a fair wedge of his Arsenal goals from just bulleting headers in, but you compare the two of them in terms of their win percentage, and you can see straight away how much Sesko would add to the team in terms of his movement, his directness, his disruption factor, which is a thing to me. Like, obviously, I can't speak for Arsenal fans, but it does sort of feel, to me at least, that when it does not click for this team, it becomes really difficult for a Saka or for an Ødegaard to single-handedly go and make something happen in the final third. And there's obviously a number of reasons for that, like lack of depth, lack of options, lack of quality outside the starting 11, but the main one is the lack of a central focal point who, even when they're not on their game, will disrupt an opposition defence enough that they'll make an exploitable mistake. So take just this one moment, for example, and yes, this is a massive bit of over-analysis, but I think if you've watched Arsenal enough in the last 12 months, it will absolutely make sense and ring several bells to you, right? So this moment here, this is against PSG, and they are about to give the ball away and concede a great chance. But prior to that, they're knocking it about quite freely, trying to find an opening. That's why they give it away, because they can't find one. But at this exact moment, look first at the positions of Rice and Merino, who were trying to be those central focal points at top, and then look at the relative positions of the two PSG centre-backs. Merino has dropped off to get the ball in this pocket, and they're not arsed. They're not afraid of him getting turned and running at them like an Isak might do, so they've just let him go. Declan Rice is stood in behind and could curve a run around to take a ball over the top, but again, they're not arsed. They do not fear Declan Rice getting in behind. And you know that really basic, like, Mel Robbins philosophy stuff that just everyone's sharing on Instagram at the minute? That is how a lot of teams view Arsenal's forward options. Just let them. Now imagine this was Alexander Isak. There is no way you would just be casually walking behind him, waiting to see what happened. You'd be coming out of this line and thus either leaving a hole for somebody else to exploit or forcing the rest of the lineup with you, creating even more space in behind. And then imagine this was Erling Haaland. There is no way you'd just be ignoring his position and casually walking away. You'd either be dropping back out of fear and creating a little space in front of you, or you'd be like constantly turning your head trying to watch him and the ball at the same time, and thus getting distracted. Like, none of this makes Rice or Merino bad players or even makes them bad options at centre forward, but it does mean they lack that disruptor quality that you need in a top forward. And the thing is, Sesko's got a ways to go before he's good enough to do this consistently at this level, but he does do this. And given that Arsenal's biggest problems when they come up against really disciplined, deep, narrow, low blocks and they really struggle to find spaces or to force mistakes, he is already good at that part of the game. So that's not nothing. The problem is, just to go back to this example here, at this stage of his career, there's no guarantee that if you found him in this space here, he wouldn't then just immediately give the ball away. Or that if he was here and you did manage to release him over the top, he would reliably convert that chance. And that's the thing I think that Arsenal really need to think about if they're going to do this transfer. Because, like, never mind the money, can they afford the time it's going to take for him to reach his potential when, as we all know, reaching potential is never a guarantee. He is an absolutely perfect fit for this team, theoretically and in the long run. But it's so very hard to predict whether he can or will deliver in the short. I mean, shit, he might. Like, being around better players and working with Mikel Arteta, he might just hit the ground running, switch goes off in his head and he scores 50 goals and Arsenal win the lot. But that is a might. And 80 to 100 million euros is a lot of money for might. So, yes, you probably want some sort of conclusion, given that you've sat through all of that. Do I think Arsenal should spend that sort of money on Benjamin Sesko? Yes, I do, actually. I really do. But you have to remember, I am not a member of Arsenal's board, recruitment team, coaching staff, or fan base. So I just want them to do that because I think it would be really fun. It could obviously go quite badly wrong and be an enormous waste of money, but I do not really, if I'm truthful, have the club's best interests at heart. I'm just in it for me. But yeah, if that's a satisfying enough conclusion for you and you've enjoyed this video, then please do consider subscribing to us here at ACFC. You may have seen we just shot past the old 100,000 subs mark. Booyah, no big deal, etc. Arsenal fans, what do you want? I think we're all pretty aligned that you're going to need a centre forward, but do you want Sesko? Do you want Gyökeres? Do you want a video on Gyökeres? Do you want somebody else? I would be interested in reading that. It will almost certainly inform the next Arsenal video I do. So, yeah. In the meantime, you can get me across all the social medias at Adam Clery, C-L-E-R-Y. I have to point at both sides because I can't remember which side of the screen I have to edit the thing on. And until next time, it's probably gone by now. Yeah, that's been me. That's been Benjamin Sesko. This is Arsenal. This is ACFC. And I'll see you soon. Bye.